When humans get angry, no force in the universe can stop their rage-fueled mission of retribution. David Richardson's finger tightened on the trigger of his sidearm as he crouched behind the jagged remains of his ship, scanning the harsh alien landscape for any sign of the bastards who shot him down. The acrid stench of melted polymers and charred circuitry still hung thick in the air. David had barely managed to drag himself from the wreckage before the damage to the power cells turned his small exploration craft into a smoldering crater on the surface of Ethoria. The distress beacon was a twisted lump of fused components, as useful now as a pack of gum. He was stranded on this unforgiving rock, injured, alone, and seething. David checked over his meager supplies salvaged from the crash, a few days' rations, a half-charged power cell for his sidearm, a basic medkit to patch up the gash across his forehead and the plasma burns on his arms. And not a damn thing to tell him why the Ethorians had blown him out of the sky without so much as a warning shot. The Ethorians, a species barely on humanity's radar before today, had just made a very dangerous enemy. As David pushed himself to his feet and set out in search of shelter, the rage and adrenaline surging through his veins insulated him from the sting of his wounds and the bone-chilling cold descending on the barren landscape. He'd survived the crash. He'd survived this hellhole of a planet, and he'd make damn sure he survived long enough to introduce the Ethorians to the fatal fury of a vengeful human. His fight for answers and retribution was just beginning, and the Ethorians would soon discover the hard way that when you attack a human without reason, you better pray to whatever gods you believe in, because we don't stop until we make you regret it. David moved through the harsh, rocky terrain with cautious grit, his senses on high alert as he approached the Ethorian settlement. He kept low to the ground, darting between jagged boulders and scraggly vegetation for cover. As he drew closer, he caught his first glimpse of the aliens who had so violently ejected him from their planet's orbit. They were tall, insectoid creatures, their exoskeletons gleaming under the harsh sunlight. 4 spindly arms protruded from each torso, and their large compound eyes glittered with an unsettling intelligence. The Ethorians moved about their settlement with purpose, their movements precise and efficient. Sleek, angular buildings rose from the dusty ground, and David could make out the unmistakable shapes of advanced weaponry. One Ethorian in particular caught David's eye, a larger, more imposing figure who seemed to be directing the others with sharp, clicking commands. For now, David decided to think of this one as Pollux, a leader among the alien hive. Creeping closer, David strained to hear any snippets of conversation, any clue as to why they had attacked him without provocation. But as he shifted his weight to get a better vantage point, his boot came down on a dry twig with a sharp crack. Instantly, the Ethorians whirled in his direction, their weapons drawn and aimed at his hiding spot. They surrounded him with alarming speed, their compound eyes blazing with hostile intent as they chittered angrily in their strange language. David slowly raised his hands, hoping to convey that he meant no harm. But Pollux strode forward, its posture aggressive and threatening. The Ethorian leader raised a device to its mouthparts, and a harsh, metallic voice filled the air. "Human, why have you invaded our territory? Your kind has no place here." "I didn't invade anything," David replied, keeping his voice steady. "I came in peace. Your people shot me down without warning. I'm just trying to understand why." Pollux's eyes narrowed. "Lies. Humans are hostile aggressors, a threat to our kind. You will come with us, invader." Before David could protest further, rough, insectoid hands seized him and dragged him into the heart of the settlement. He struggled against their grip, but the Ethorians were far stronger than they looked. Within moments, he found himself thrown into a cramped, dimly lit cell, the door slamming shut with a resounding clang. As he picked himself up off the hard floor, David could hear the Ethorians conversing in agitated tones just outside. Their words were translated in jarring bursts by the device Pollux had used. Humans cannot be reasoned with. An example must be made. See the prisoner. Send a message to their planet." A chill ran down David's spine as the grim reality of his situation sank in. Diplomacy had failed. The Ithorians saw humans as a threat to be eliminated, and now they intended to make him a casualty of their baseless aggression. He knew he had to find a way out of this cell, off this planet, and back to Earth to warn humanity of the danger these aliens posed. His opportunity came sooner than expected. An Ithorian guard entered the cell to bring him a meager ration of food and water. As soon as the door opened, David launched himself at the unsuspecting guard, his own survival instincts overpowering the alien's surprised reflexes. A few well-placed blows, and the guard crumpled to the floor. Alarms blared as David raced out of the cell and through the winding corridors of the Ithorian compound. He could hear the pounding of pursuing feet and the enraged chittering of Pollux and his warriors as they closed in behind him. Bursting out into the open air, David sprinted for the wilderness beyond the settlement, his heart pounding in his ears. Energy blasts sizzled past him as the Ithorians opened fire, their advanced weapons tearing up the ground at his heels. But David had always been quick on his feet, and now he used every ounce of that speed and agility to stay one step ahead of his pursuers. He veered into a narrow, twisting ravine, his mind racing as he sought for any advantage in the treacherous terrain. A precariously balanced boulder caught his eye, and David didn't hesitate. He threw his shoulder against the rock with all his strength, feeling it shift and then tumble down into the ravine behind him with a deafening crash. The Ithorians skidded to a halt, their path blocked by the sudden rock slide. David caught a glimpse of Pollux, the Ithorian leader's limbs pinned beneath the rubble, its compound eyes wide with pain and fury, but there was no time to savor this small victory. David turned and fled deeper into the wilds of Ithoria, leaving his pursuers behind, for now. As night fell, David took shelter in a shallow cave, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He tore a strip of fabric from his shirt and bound the wound on his arm, where an energy blast had grazed him during the chase. The pain was a dull throb beneath the adrenaline still surging through his system, but it was nothing compared to the anger burning in his chest. Anger at the Ithorians for shooting him down without cause, for taking him prisoner and threatening his life. Anger at the injustice of it all, the sheer arrogance and hostility of these aliens toward a species they knew nothing about. And beneath that anger, a dogged drive took root. He had to find a way off this planet, back to Earth. He had to warn humanity about the Ithorians and their aggression to make them understand the threat they posed. And he had to find out what these aliens were planning and stop them before it was too late. For the first time since he'd crashed on this godforsaken rock, David felt the full weight of his new reality settle on his shoulders. He was humanity's sole representative on Ithoria, the only one who knew the truth about these hostile aliens. He was humanity's best hope for survival, and he would not let them down. David Richardson pressed his back against the rough bark of an alien tree, his heart pounding as he peered around the trunk. The Ithorian command base loomed in the distance, a fortress of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields. He gripped the stolen alien weapon tightly, its unfamiliar contours digging into his palms. As night fell, David crept closer to the base perimeter. The harsh Ithorian landscape offered little cover, forcing him to crawl on his belly through patches of razor-sharp vegetation. His muscles screamed in protest, but the burning rage in his chest drove him forward. He froze as voices chittered nearby. A patrol of heavily armed Ithorians marched past, their compound eyes scanning the darkness. David held his breath, willing his body to blend with the shadows. The patrol passed within inches of his hiding spot, close enough for him to smell the acrid stench of their exoskeletons. Once they were gone, David analyzed the base defenses. The perimeter wall stretched high into the sky, dripping with sensors and weapon emplacements. A frontal assault would be suicide. He needed stealth. David waited for hours, watching the guards' patrol patterns. When the moons of Ithoria reached their zenith, he made his move. He sprinted across open ground, his footfalls silent on the alien soil. Reaching the wall, he pulled out pitons salvaged from his crashed ship and began to climb. Halfway up, an alarm blared. David's muscles tensed, ready for incoming fire. But the sound came from within the base, an unrelated security alert. He used the distraction to haul himself over the top of the wall and drop into the compound. Inside, David stuck to the shadows, relying on stolen intel to navigate the labyrinthine corridors. He disabled security systems with precise sabotage, leaving a trail of sparking wires and offline cameras in his wake. The central command center loomed before him, guarded by a phalanx of elite Ithorian warriors. Their carapaces gleamed with bioluminescent patterns denoting high rank. David's mind raced, searching for a solution. He couldn't fight them all. A nearby control panel caught his eye. David's fingers flew across the alien interface, triggering alarms throughout the base. As the warriors scattered to respond to multiple perceived threats, he slipped through their ranks. Inside the command center, David came face to face with Pollux. The Ithorian leader's wounds from their last encounter had healed, leaving him even more imposing. Pollux's mandibles clicked in fury as he recognized the human intruder. "You dare invade our stronghold?" Pollux's translator crackled. "Foolish human, I will crush you myself." Pollux lunged, his powerful limbs slamming David against a bank of computers. David's ribs cracked under the impact. He struggled to breathe as Pollux pressed a sharp appendage against his throat. "Your species will be enslaved," Pollux hissed, "exterminated like vermin." Something snapped inside David. With a primal roar, he slammed his forehead into Pollux's face. The Ithorian's compound eyes shattered, ichor spraying across the room. David followed up with savage blows, pummeling Pollux until the alien leader collapsed in a broken heap. Panting heavily, David staggered to the main computer terminal. He downloaded critical intel on Ithorian military assets and transmitted it to human forces. Then he turned the base's own weapons against other Ithorian targets across the planet, unleashing a devastating barrage. Alarms wailed as the base shook under the onslaught. Pollux dragged himself upright, flanked by his last loyal warriors. "I will see your entire species exterminated!" the Ithorian leader shrieked. David's vision went red. He charged into the Ithorian ranks, a whirlwind of violence. Alien bodies fell before him as he fought with inhuman fury. When it was over, David stood alone among the carnage. Pollux, barely alive, clawed towards a fallen weapon. "Even if I fall," he rasped, "more Ithorians will come to destroy you." David's fist rose and fell again and again until Pollux finally lay still. Stumbling through the flames engulfing the base, David found an Ithorian shuttle. As he lifted off, he triggered the base's self-destruct sequence. The resulting explosion scarred the face of Ithoria, a wound visible from orbit. In the cockpit of the stolen ship, David's hands shook as the adrenaline faded. He had struck a crippling blow against the Ithorians, but at a terrible cost. There could be no peace now, no turning back. Humanity and the Ithorians were locked in a war of extinction. As Ithoria receded behind him, David set course for Earth. He had to warn them. The real war was just beginning. The stolen Ithorian shuttle shuddered as David punched in the launch sequence. Alarms blared throughout the alien base as he lifted off, the ground falling away beneath him. Through the view screen, he watched flames engulf the command center. His fingers flew across the unfamiliar controls, transmitting the intel he'd gathered to Earth's defense forces. The data streamed out into the void of space, carrying with it humanity's best hope for survival. As the shuttle broke atmosphere, a brilliant flash lit up the planet's surface. The base's self-destruct tore a massive crater in Ithoria's landscape, a final blow against the aliens who had attacked him without provocation. David allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction before plotting a course away from the doomed world. He'd barely cleared the system when an encoded transmission crackled through the shuttle's comm system. "Richardson, this is Admiral Winston. We've received your data. Well done, son." David's shoulders sagged with relief. "Admiral, the situation is grave, I know. I've taken command of all available ships, and we're mobilizing to meet this threat. But our main force is weeks away from the frontier. We need you at Theta 6 space station in the Narcora system ASAP. I'm assembling a vanguard fleet there for a preemptive strike. Understood, sir. I'm on my way. David pushed the alien engines to their limit, racing across the stars toward humanity's hastily assembled defense. As he approached Theta 6, a sprawling construct of metal and light, he saw dozens of human warships gathered around it. Frigates, destroyers, and battlecruisers formed up in attack formations, their weapons primed for war. He docked the shuttle and sprinted to the command center, where Admiral Winston stood before a holographic display of nearby systems. The grizzled veteran's face was etched with lines of worry as he addressed his gathered commanders. Gentlemen, we're outnumbered and outgunned, but thanks to Richardson's intel, we have a chance to bloody their nose before the main invasion begins. We'll use hit-and-run tactics, striking their supply lines and forward bases to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Winston's eyes locked onto David. Richardson, I need you for a critical mission behind enemy lines. You'll lead a strike team to sabotage an Ithorian shipyard. Plant these viral logic bombs in their network. He handed David a data chip. It should cripple their fleet from within. David nodded, studying the faces of his new team. Malachi Ortiz, a burly demolitions expert. Joe Gomez, their tech specialist, and Mira Al-Hassan, a stealth infiltration prodigy. Suit up, David ordered. We launch in 10. They donned the Ithorian combat armor David had stolen, its alien contours still unsettling. As they boarded their captured shuttle, David felt the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on him. The team slipped past Ithorian security cordons with ease, their stolen codes granting them access to the massive shipyard. As they approached the kilometer-long dreadnought under construction, David's breath caught in his throat. The alien vessel bristled with weapons that could reduce entire cities to ash. Stay sharp, he whispered as they docked. We're in the belly of the beast now. They moved through the ship's cavernous corridors, dodging patrols of chittering Ithorians. David's heart raced as they reached the central computer core. While Gomez uploaded the viral package, David and the others worked to sabotage key systems throughout the ship. Just as they finished destabilizing the dreadnought's volatile reactors, alarms began to blare. Their presence had been detected. Time to go! David shouted, leading his team in a desperate sprint back to their shuttle. Energy blasts sizzled past them as Ithorian security forces gave chase. They were halfway to safety when David's comm crackled to life. Admiral Winston's voice was tight with urgency. Richardson, the Ithorians are moving early. We're launching now to slow them down. Get out of there. David and his team piled into their shuttle, blasting out of the shipyard under heavy fire. As they cleared the massive structure, David looked back just in time to see their sabotage pay off. The dreadnought's hull buckled, massive explosions tearing it apart from within. The fireball engulfed surrounding ships and facilities, crippling a significant portion of the Ithorian fleet. In the distance, David saw Winston's vanguard force emerge from hyperspace, catching the reeling Ithorians off guard. Human warships unleashed a devastating barrage, destroying multiple alien capital ships in the opening salvo. But even as they won this skirmish, David knew the true test was yet to come. The Ithorians' numbers were vast, their dedication unshakable. This was only the beginning of a war that would determine humanity's very existence. The acrid stench of ozone and alien blood filled David's nostrils as he stood over Pollux's broken form. The Ithorian warlord's compound eyes flickered weakly, ichor oozing from cracks in his shattered exoskeleton. Secure the prisoner, David barked to his team. Malachi Ortiz stepped forward, slapping restraints onto Pollux's limp limbs. Mira Al-Hassan's voice crackled over the comm. Perimeter secure, but we've got inbound hostiles. ETA 2 minutes. David nodded grimly. Gomez, get what you can from their systems. We're Oscar Mike in 90 seconds. As Joe Gomez's fingers flew across alien interfaces, David knelt beside the fallen Pollux. The Ithorian's mandibles clicked weakly. This changes nothing, Pollux hissed through his translator. My death will only fuel the fires of vengeance. David leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "You're not dying today. You're coming with us to answer for your crimes." Hauling the alien to his feet, David and his team fought their way back through twisting corridors. The walls shook as Ithorian reinforcements bombarded the bunker complex. They burst into the open air of Nyarit Prime, greeted by the thunder of orbital bombardment. Human warships hung in the sky, their weapons carving fiery swaths through Ithorian positions. "Arclight, this is Strike Team Alpha," David shouted into his comm. "Mission accomplished. VIP secure. Request immediate evac." The sleek form of their stealth frigate swooped low, rear hatch yawning open. David and his team sprinted aboard, dragging their alien prisoner. As they lifted off, David watched the planet's surface recede. Nyarit Prime burned, the scars of battle etched across its face. A Pyrrhic victory, but a victory nonetheless. Aboard the command ship, Admiral Winston's craggy features filled the briefing room's main screen. His eyes locked onto the restrained form of Pollux. "Outstanding work, Richardson," Winston said. "Intel's already combing through the data you recovered, but this war's just the beginning." David nodded grimly. "What's our next move, sir?" Winston's face hardened. "We've got reports of Ithorian raids hitting colonies all along the frontier. They're probing for weaknesses, trying to split our forces." The Admiral manipulated a holographic display, highlighting a cluster of systems. "I need your team to reinforce Outpost Sigma. It's a vital choke point, and if it falls, we lose our early warning network for an entire sector." David studied the tactical overlay, mind already racing through potential strategies. "We'll hold the line, sir, whatever it takes." As the briefing concluded, David turned to his weary team. Their faces were etched with exhaustion, but their eyes burned with unwavering willpower. "Get some rest," he ordered. "We deploy in 6 hours." David made his way to the brig, where Pollux sat in a specially designed containment cell. The Ithorian's alien features were unreadable, but David sensed a simmering hatred emanating from the creature. "Your kind will be exterminated," Pollux chittered. "We are endless. We are legion." David met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. "Maybe, but not today, and not by you." As he turned to leave, David's fists clenched at his sides. The real war had only just begun, and humanity would need every ounce of strength and courage to survive the trials ahead. David Richardson stood before Admiral Winston, his tactical gear still caked with the alien ichor from Nyarit Prime. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a swirling mass of purple and green gases. "The Zeri Nebula," Winston said, his voice grave. "Our next target." David's eyes narrowed. "What are we looking at, sir?" Winston manipulated the controls, zooming in on a cluster of structures hidden within the nebula's depths. Ithorian bioweapons research facilities. They're working on something that could turn this war in their favor, a modified version of the Crixer xenomorph. David felt his blood run cold. He'd heard whispers of the Crixers before, parasitic horrors with the power to control the dead. "How do we stop them?" "We don't just stop them," Winston replied. "We wipe them off the face of the galaxy." Hours later, David and his team were aboard a captured Ithorian stealth corvette, slipping through the nebula's swirling gases. Malachi Ortiz, their demolitions expert, double-checked the array of shaped charges and thermite weapons strapped to his chest. "This is some next-level shit," Ortiz muttered. "You sure about this, boss?" David nodded grimly. "We don't have a choice. If the Ithorians weaponize those Crixers, humanity's finished." As they approached the hidden facility, Joe Gomez worked his tech magic, feeding false credentials into the Ithorian security systems. Alarms blared, but it was a calculated risk, a distraction to draw attention away from their true approach vector. They docked at an emergency airlock, cutting through the hull with plasma torches. The team moved swiftly through twisting corridors, their stolen Ithorian armor allowing them to blend in with the panicked facility staff. When they reached the inner research zones, all hell broke loose. David gave the signal, and Ortiz unleashed his payload. Shaped charges blew containment doors off their hinges. Thermite burned white-hot, melting through reinforced walls. As alarms screamed and emergency systems activated, David charged toward the main xenomorph chambers. Ithorian security forces poured in, their energy weapons filling the air with sizzling bolts of plasma. David dove behind a console, returning fire with his captured Ithorian rifle. He saw Mira al-Hassan moving like a ghost through the chaos, her stealth field generator allowing her to flank the enemy positions. With a thunderous crack, the final stasis field containing the Crixers shattered. David watched in horror as writhing, tentacled monstrosities erupted from their tanks. The air filled with an otherworldly shriek that seemed to claw at the inside of his skull. "Fall back!" David roared over the din. "Extraction point now!" They fought their way through corridors rapidly filling with a nightmarish biohazard. David saw Ithorian corpses twitching and rising, puppeted by the psionic influence of the rampaging Crixers. As they reached their ship, Ortiz primed the final surprise, megaton-range thermobaric demolition charges. The team sealed themselves inside the Corvette as Ortiz hit the detonator. The Zeri Nebula lit up like a newborn star as the charges ignited. David watched through the view screen as the entire facility was consumed in a cataclysmic firestorm, taking with it the fruits of the Ithorians' vile research. As they rocketed away from the inferno, David's comm crackled to life. It was Admiral Winston. "Richardson, we've got a situation. Halcyon 7 is under heavy Ithorian assault. I need you there yesterday." David looked at his battered but unbroken team. "You heard the man. Let's go save a world." The dropship's engines whined as it plunged through Typhon Exo's turbulent atmosphere. David Richardson gripped the overhead rail, his eyes scanning the faces of his diverse strike team. The Kravtox warrior Gazak clicked his mandibles in anticipation, while the Draltsi hunter Zisara sharpened her bone blade with practiced precision. Beside them, the Hekaril cyborg assassin unit X-1N17 ran silent diagnostics, its ocular implants glowing an eerie blue. 30 seconds to insertion," the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Stealth systems engaged." David nodded to his team. "Remember, we hit hard and fast. No mistakes." The dropship's bay doors hissed open, revealing a hellscape below. Typhon Exo's surface was a maze of jagged obsidian spires and pools of bubbling iridescent liquid. In the distance, a massive structure rose from the planet's crust, the ancient temple they'd come to destroy. They rappelled down, boots crunching on brittle volcanic glass. David's HUD flashed warnings of toxic atmospheric compounds and dangerous radiation levels. He signaled the team forward, their cloaking fields shimmering as they moved. They encountered their first group of Ithorian cultists at the edge of a steaming chemical lake. The aliens were hunched over some sort of pulsating organic mass, their chitinous fingers working feverishly to shape it. David raised his hand, and his team froze. He tapped his wrist computer, sending targeting data to each member. On his signal, they opened fire. Pulse rounds and energy blasts tore through the cultists before they could even cry out. As they pushed deeper into the alien dig site, the very air seemed to thicken with malevolence. Strange whispers echoed at the edge of David's consciousness, promising power beyond imagining if he'd only surrender his will. "The Xenovore's influence grows stronger," Gazak growled, his four eyes darting nervously. "We must hurry." They reached the temple's outer defenses, a shimmering energy barrier that crackled with otherworldly power. X-1N17 stepped forward, interfacing directly with an alien control node. Its metallic voice was emotionless as it reported, "Breaching security protocols. Estimated time to completion, 47 seconds. David scanned the perimeter. "Watch our backs. This is about to get loud." The barrier fell with a thunderous crack, and alarms immediately began to wail. Scores of Ithorian cultists poured from the temple entrance, their eyes glowing with fanatical zeal. "Push through!" David roared, unleashing a barrage of fire. Zixara became a whirlwind of slashing claws, while Gazak's massive frame absorbed punishment as he bulldozed forward. They fought their way inside, deploying shaped charges to blast through sealed doorways. The air grew thick with acrid smoke and the stench of alien blood. In the temple's heart, they found a chamber of horrors. Human prisoners writhed in agony, their bodies twisting and reshaping as eldritch energies coursed through them. Ithorian priests chanted in a language that made David's ears bleed. And there, rising from a pulsating altar of flesh and metal, was the Xenovore. It defied description, a mass of ever-shifting matter that hurt the mind to look upon. David felt an overwhelming urge to claw out his own eyes, to end the torment of perceiving such an abomination. The thing's attention focused on them, and David's world exploded into pain. Visions of cosmic horror and eternal suffering flooded his mind. He saw galaxies die, entire species screaming as they were consumed by the void. Through sheer force of will, David forced his hand to his belt, fingers closing around the singularity charge. With a guttural cry of defiance, he hurled it directly into the writhing mass of the Xenovore. "Fire everything!" he screamed, his voice raw with fury and pain. His team responded, pouring every weapon they had into the creature. Reality itself seemed to warp and tear as the micro-singularity detonated within the Xenovore's form. The chamber filled with a light brighter than 1,000 suns, and David knew no more. David Richardson blinked away the afterimage of the singularity detonation, his ears ringing in the sudden silence. The chamber where the Xenovore had writhed now stood empty, reality slowly knitting itself back together. "Status report," he croaked, tasting blood in his mouth. X-117's metallic voice cut through the haze. Xenovore entity, destroyed. Ithorian cultists, neutralized. Mission objective, achieved. David nodded, steadying himself against a twisted piece of alien machinery. He surveyed his battered team, bloodied but unbowed. They'd won, but at a terrible cost. Hours later, aboard the command ship, Admiral Winston's grizzled face filled the briefing room screen. His eyes gleamed with a mix of triumph and stubborn persistence. "Outstanding work, Richardson. You've dealt the Ithorians a crippling blow, but we're not done yet." David leaned forward, ignoring the protests of his battered body. "What's our next move, sir?" Winston manipulated a holographic display, revealing a desolate, irradiated world. "Gorgon X Prime. Our interrogators cracked some captured Ithorian brass. We've pinpointed their final command bunker, the nerve center of what's left of their empire." Ortiz whistled low. "Sounds like a fortress, sir." "It is," Winston agreed, "which is why we're sending in a vanguard team to soften it up before the main assault. Richardson, you'll lead the infiltration." David nodded, already formulating strategies. "We'll need something with real punch to crack that shell." Winston's lips quirked in a rare smile. "How does a Thanatos-class assault lander sound?" "We've acquired one." 12 hours later, David stood in the cockpit of the massive Ithorian dropship, watching the toxic world of Gorgon X Prime grow larger in the view screen. Beside him, Gomez worked the alien controls with inhuman speed, his neural implants interfacing directly with the ship's systems. "Stealth systems holding," Gomez reported. "They haven't made us yet." In the cargo bay, David's team made final equipment checks. Human operatives Ortiz and Al-Hassan worked alongside the hulking forms of Kravtok's warriors and the lithe, predatory shapes of Dralt-C hunters. A strike force built to penetrate the most fortified enemy position in the galaxy. David keyed his comm. "This is it, people. No matter what's waiting for us down there, we punch through. For Earth, for every human world these bastards tried to burn, we end this today." The dropship screamed through Gorgon X Prime's upper atmosphere, radiation alarms blaring. David gripped the flight harness as Gomez pushed the engines beyond their limits. "Bunker dead ahead," Gomez shouted. "Brace for impact!" The Thanatos-class lander slammed into the bunker's outer shell like a meteor, tons of reinforced armor crumpling under the immense force. Emergency systems fired, filling the cargo bay with impact foam as the ship ground to a shuddering halt deep inside the Ithorian fortress. Breach charges blew the emergency hatches. David's team poured out into dim, smoke-filled corridors. The clash of battle erupted immediately, as Ithorian guards swarmed to meet the human intruders. Pulse rifles crackled with deadly energy. Kravtok's war cries mingled with the screech of dying Ithorians. David ducked under a swipe from an alien blade, bringing his rifle up in a vicious butt stroke that crushed the creature's exoskeleton. They fought their way through twisting halls and chambers, the close confines turning every engagement into a brutal melee. Ortiz's demolition charges opened paths through sealed bulkheads, while Al-Hassan's stealth field allowed her to strike from unexpected angles. Hours bled together in a haze of gunfire and alien blood. David lost count of the rooms they'd cleared, the enemies they'd put down. His armor was scarred and dented, his body aching from a dozen minor wounds. Finally, they reached a massive set of blast doors, the entrance to the command level. Beyond lay the heart of the Ithorian leadership. "Ortiz," David called, "blow it." The demolitions expert grinned, planting a cluster of shaped charges. "Fire in the hole!" The explosion shook the entire complex. As the smoke cleared, David saw hundreds of Ithorian warriors massing for a final stand. He keyed his long-range comm. "Strike Force Actual, this is Vanguard Lead. We've breached the inner sanctum. Request fire mission. Danger close." The response was immediate. "Copy that, Vanguard. Bunker busters inbound. Take cover." David and his team ducked into reinforced alcoves as the world around them erupted in flame and thunder. The bunker-busting ordnance tore through levels of armor and stone, vaporizing the Ithorian defenders. When the barrage lifted, David emerged to find the way clear. He waved forward the human Marines pouring in behind them, then led his team deeper into the shattered complex. They fought through pockets of fanatical resistance, pushing toward the central chamber, where intel said they'd find the Supreme Archon, the mastermind behind the Ithorians' genocidal campaign. At last, they reached the final door. David planted breaching charges himself, stepping back as they detonated. The thick barrier fell away, revealing a vast, dimly lit throne room. And there, perched atop a dais of twisted metal and pulsing organic matter, sat the Archon. The creature was a nightmarish fusion of Ithorian biology and alien technology, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "So," the Archon's voice grated in David's mind, "the mammals have come to bare their teeth." David raised his rifle. "It's over. Your empire's finished." The Archon's laughter was a psychic assault that sent several of David's team to their knees. "Fool! We are eternal. We are legion. Your pitiful species will be but a footnote in our grand." The Archon's words died in its throat as David's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the chamber, leaving only silence in its wake. David lowered his weapon, his face a mask of cold detachment. The Supreme Archon's corpse slumped to the ground, green ichor oozing from the precision headshot. He turned to Admiral Winston, who stood nearby with a grim expression. "It's done," David said flatly. "What's our next move?" Winston's weathered face hardened. "One last piece of business. Pollux." The name sent a chill through the room. Pollux, the Ithorian warlord whose brutal invasion had sparked this war. David's eyes narrowed. "Where is he?" "High security hold on my flagship," Winston replied. "I thought you might want to handle this personally." David nodded once, his eyes sharp tight. "Let's finish this." The walk to the prison hold felt endless. David's boots rang out on the metal decking, each step bringing him closer to a final reckoning. When they reached the cell, two heavily armed Marines stood at attention. "Open it," David ordered. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, chained to the wall, was Pollux. The once mighty Ithorian warlord was a pathetic sight, battered, scarred, but somehow still defiant. His compound eyes glittered with hatred as he recognized David. "Richardson," Pollux rasped, mandibles clicking. "Come to gloat over your victory, mammal." David said nothing, stepping into the cell. He stared at Pollux, taking in every detail of the alien who had caused so much suffering. Pollux's defiance crumbled under that impassive gaze. "What are you waiting for?" he shrieked. "Kill me and be done with it." "No," David said quietly. First, you're going to talk. Hours passed. David emerged from the cell, his uniform stained with alien blood and worse. He walked past Winston without a word, heading for the nearest viewport. The stars beyond seemed colder now, more distant. Winston joined him, his voice low. Is it finished? David nodded, his eyes fixed on the void. It's finished. Humanity is safe. As David stared into the abyss of space, he felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Only a hollow emptiness where rage had once burned. He had become vengeance incarnate, humanity's fury given form. And now that the threat was gone, what remained? Years passed. David found himself on a remote colony world, far from the scars of war. He stood on his homestead, watching twin suns set over an alien horizon. The life he'd built here was simple, peaceful. Yet always, in the back of his mind, a cold vigilance remained. As night fell, David looked up at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, new threats lurked, new horrors that would test humanity's determination. And when that day came, David knew that others would rise to meet it, men and women forged in the crucible of war, ready to do whatever it took to ensure humanity's survival. David's hand unconsciously drifted to the pistol at his hip. He was retired now, but that instinct, that readiness to fight and kill for his species, would never truly fade. It was a price he'd gladly paid, and one he'd pay again in a heartbeat. The stars glittered coldly overhead, silent sentinels over a universe fraught with danger. David Richardson stood watch, a guardian even in peace, ready for the day when humanity would once again be called to arms against the darkness that waited beyond the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.